All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're breaking down Aristotle's foundational text on the hylomorphic theory of the mind and body. It's famously known as On the Soul, or De Anima. If you have ever wondered how the great classical thinkers bridged that massive gap between raw physical matter and the actual spark of consciousness, well, you are absolutely in the right place. So, what is the essential nature of the soul? It sounds like a pretty simple question, right? But honestly, it's profoundly difficult. And it sets the philosophical stakes for Aristotle's entire inquiry into the fundamental principle of animal life. For Aristotle, you have to understand, the soul isn't some ghost floating around inside a machine. It's the very essence, the literal animating principle of living things. But pinning down exactly what that means is, as he fully admits, one of the most difficult things in the world. To grasp his brilliant conclusions, we're going to follow a specific roadmap today. We'll look at the scope of inquiry, refuting previous theories, the soul as actuality, the hierarchy of faculties, and finally, the mechanics of perception. Starting right off with Section 1, the scope of inquiry and the principle of animal life. Aristotle kicks things off by establishing just how tough, but absolutely crucial it is to study the soul. He argues that we have to rigorously identify both its essential nature and the bodily affections that attach to the living animal. You see, to understand nature itself, we really have to understand the soul, because the soul is the bedrock cause of why living bodies exist and function the way they do. He insists that affections, things like anger, courage, and appetite, aren't just abstract, floating feelings. They are entirely inseparable from the material of the body. Moving on to Section 2, refuting previous theories and clearing out those false premises. Before building his own framework, Aristotle takes a step back. He impartially unpacks and critiques the prevailing theories of the guys who came before him. This brilliantly illustrates the historical friction between viewing the soul as purely physical atomic movement versus seeing it as an abstract harmonic ratio. On one side, you have the materialist view from Democritus, claiming the soul is basically just highly mobile, spherical atoms of fire bumping into things. On the flip side, thinkers like Empedocles and Plato suggested the harmonics view, where the soul is a harmony or a proportion of bodily elements mixed together perfectly. But Aristotle systematically tears down these assumptions. He points out a massive flaw. Both extremes totally fail to explain how a soul actually interacts with a specific physical body. He argues that a soul can't just be little moving spheres pulling the body around. I mean, if that were true, how would the soul ever cause the body to rest? And regarding the harmonics view, well, he points out that a harmony or a ratio doesn't actually have the power to originate movement. You can't say a mathematical ratio is what decides to get up and walk across a room. Okay, Section 3, the soul as actuality. Which brings us to the hylomorphic breakthrough. This right here is the revolutionary middle ground of his whole philosophy. It's called hylomorphism. Hyl meaning matter and morphe meaning form. The crucial point is Aristotle's definition of the soul as the first grade of actuality of a natural organized body. That simply means form and matter are inextricably linked. The body is the matter. It has the potential for life. But the soul is the form. It's the actuality that turns that physical potential into a living, functioning reality. You literally cannot have one without the other. It's kind of like how you can't have the shape of a wax seal without the wax itself. Now, to make this super dense academic concept a bit more accessible, Aristotle grounds it in a highly tangible, everyday analogy. He talks about an axe. Let's look closely at how he breaks this down. Think about it like this. If an axe were alive, its physical materials, the iron, the wood, that would be its body, right? Its potentiality. But its defining function, its ability to chop, that would be its actualizing soul. If the axe completely loses its ability to chop, it basically ceases to be an axe in anything other than name. The chopping itself is the form, the actuality, the soul of the axe. From there, he scales this concept up perfectly to a biological organism, using the analogy of an eye. This is where hylomorphism really clicks into place for biological life. The pupil and the physical tissue? That's just the matter, the potentiality. The active power of actually seeing is the actuality, the soul. When sight is removed, it is no more a real eye than a painted figure's eye on a statue. The soul is exactly what gives the biological matter its living purpose. The soul is to the body what sight is to the eye. Which leads us to Section 4, the hierarchy of faculties, or the architecture of life. Aristotle doesn't just treat the soul as some one-sized-fits-all deal. Instead, he builds this incredibly structured biological classification where life scales upwards from the most basic vegetative survival all the way up to human intellect. Plants, for example, have only the nutritive soul. They take in food and they grow. Animals possess that plus the sensory and appetitive soul, which gives them perception, pleasure, pain, and desire. Some animals add the locomotive faculty so they can move around. And finally, humans possess all of these, topped off with the thinking faculty, the reasoning mind. The big takeaway for you here is the profound interconnectedness of life. The human power of thinking doesn't just float in a void, it's built directly on top of the foundation of nutrition and sensation. You don't have separate little souls fighting inside you. You have one soul, and if it's a higher order soul, it naturally encompasses the lower functions. Just like you can't draw a square without inherently drawing triangles within it, you can't have a rational human soul without the underlying capacities to eat, grow, and feel. Finally, let's hit section 5, the mechanics of perception, and how we receive form without matter. So let's see how this hierarchy actually applies to sensation in the real world. Aristotle rigorously maps out perception, proving that every single sense requires a distinct medium to transmit a special object that it alone can accurately judge. Sight requires the transparent medium of light to perceive color. Hearing requires air or water to transmit the impact of sound. Smell needs air or water for odor. You cannot perceive an object by placing it directly on the sense organ. Literally, if you put a colored object directly against your eyeball, you see nothing. The medium is absolutely essential. He pulls this entire mechanical process together with what is arguably one of the most famous and striking analogies in all of classical philosophy. When we perceive something, what is actually happening to us mechanically? Think of a piece of wax taking the imprint of a signet ring. Just as the wax takes the shape of the stamp but doesn't absorb the actual gold of the ring, your eye receives the form of color without receiving the physical colored object into your head. Sensation is an alteration. Your sense organ starts off entirely neutral, and then it is literally assimilated to the perceived object, moving from potentiality to actuality. When you see a red apple, the form of redness actualizes in your eye, but thankfully, the physical matter of the apple doesn't enter your body. Which leaves us with a truly fascinating puzzle regarding the boundary between the perceiver and the perceived. If thinking and perceiving are quite literally the acts of becoming one with the form of an object, what does that ultimately make the human intellect? Do our minds become what we study? It's a brilliant question. I hope this rigorously structured look at hylomorphism inspires you to explore Aristotle's worldview even further. Keep learning, keep questioning, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.